Why is it that some people walk into a room and instantly earn respect without ever raising their voices and without needing to prove anything? In a world where noise is mistaken for power and opinions are thrown around like currency, quiet strength has become rare, but never irrelevant. If you've ever felt overlooked because you chose composure over conflict, silence over reaction, or discipline over impulse, this message is for you. The truth is, real authority begins the moment you stop chasing approval and start mastering your own mind. Not your boss, not your critics, not the chaos around you, just your own thoughts, reactions, and presence. That's where Stoicism begins, and where everything changes. The Stoic way doesn't promise applause, but it guarantees clarity. When you discipline your mind and speak less, you become the one people watch, not because you're loud, but because you're steady. This video will guide you through 8 timeless principles rooted in Stoic philosophy, practices that help you stay calm in loud environments, protect your energy, master emotional control, and lead without saying a word. You'll discover that stillness isn't passive, it's commanding, and respect doesn't come when you demand it, but when you no longer need it. So stay with me. The part that will change how you carry yourself starts now. If this speaks to something inside you, hit subscribe and share your quiet victories in the comments below. Let's begin. 1. Control yourself first before you try to control the world. Everything begins within. If your mind is chaotic, your actions will be scattered. If your emotions rule you, your reactions will betray you. And if you cannot govern yourself, your attempts to control the world around you will always feel like fighting smoke with your bare hands. The Stoics understood this with brutal clarity. No matter how turbulent the world becomes, your only true power lies in your ability to control what's happening inside you. The storms outside matter far less than the storm you allow within. Most people spend their entire lives trying to bend the world into submission, trying to get others to respect them, to agree with them, to act the way they expect. But the harder you push the outside, the more you expose the weakness inside. You don't need to prove control over others. What you need is to master your own attention, your own focus, your own response. Because self-discipline isn't about restriction, it's about precision. It's about knowing where your energy goes and choosing what deserves it. Imagine this. A man walks through the door after a long, exhausting day. His child spills a glass of water on the floor. It's minor. But in that moment, the man stands at a crossroads. He can explode and turn a small accident into a lasting scar. Or he can take a breath, choose calm, and use the moment to teach, not to punish. One choice is a release of frustration, the other is a demonstration of power. Not over someone else, but over himself. That is what Stoic composure looks like in real life. You see, strength isn't how loud you yell when things go wrong. It's how quiet your mind remains when the world tries to shake you. Anyone can react, few can respond. The difference is self-control. And that's why this principle matters. When you shift your focus from trying to control others to disciplining your own mind, you reclaim energy that was otherwise wasted on frustration, resistance, and emotional fatigue. You build clarity. You sharpen awareness. You become someone who doesn't need to chase respect because it follows you. Controlling your inner world begins with catching the moment before the reaction. That tiny gap between stimulus and response is where freedom lives. Most people never pause. They move on autopilot. But when you create space to question your initial emotion, to ask yourself, is this really worth it? You've already stepped ahead of 99% of people around you. That pause is not weakness, it is conscious power. And over time, it becomes your edge. There was once a man in a corporate office. Quiet, focused, rarely seen arguing. He wasn't the loudest in meetings. But whenever chaos hit, layoffs, market crashes, conflicts, he remained steady. Colleagues noticed. Leaders leaned in. When the moment came for leadership, they didn't ask the noisiest candidate. They asked the one who had already mastered his own state. Because in every room, people subconsciously look for one thing. Who's the calmest in the storm? That's the one they trust. That's the one they follow. In Stoic philosophy, external chaos is inevitable, but internal discipline is a choice. The more unpredictable the world becomes, the more important it is to hold your ground internally. And no, this doesn't mean becoming cold or emotionless. It means observing your emotions without letting them hijack your decisions. Anger may rise, but you don't let it speak. Fear may creep in, but you don't let it steer. Doubt may whisper, but you choose whether it speaks truth. You don't silence your emotions, you lead them. This kind of self-command doesn't happen by accident. It takes practice. It begins with noticing your triggers and seeing them as training grounds, not threats. Every time someone disrespects you, you get a choice. Escalate and play their game, or maintain composure and elevate the entire situation. Every time life doesn't go as planned, you get to decide, spiral into frustration or anchor into clarity. Self-discipline isn't about perfection, it's about choosing not to surrender your power. Too often people think control means control over others. But the greatest form of control is not to need it at all. That's why the quiet man is feared more than the loud one. The composed man is respected more than the reactive one. And the one who governs himself becomes the one others look to for leadership, without ever asking for it. When you stop trying to change everything outside and start refining what's within, you tap into a different kind of strength. A still kind, a steady kind. And in a world that's constantly pulled in every direction, the man who stays rooted becomes magnetic. Not because he's chasing attention, but because he's mastered the one thing that matters most, his own mind. So before you try to manage the team, fix the family, or change your circumstances, start by mastering your focus. Discipline your impulses. Silence the need to control everything and everyone. Redirect that energy inward, and watch how, without force, you begin to move differently. With more clarity, with more precision, with a presence that speaks volumes, even when you say nothing at all. Because in the end, real power isn't how you bend others to your will. It's how you remain unshaken while the world tries to pull you off course. When you lead yourself first, everything else aligns. And that's where respect truly begins. 2. Speak less, observe more. The more you speak, the less you hear. And the less you hear, the more you miss. In a world addicted to noise, real wisdom begins the moment you stop trying to be the loudest voice in the room. Stoicism doesn't reward the reactive, it respects the watcher. The one who sees everything, says little, and moves with precision. Observation is not just a skill, it's a discipline, a mindset, and a form of silent strength. And when practiced with intention, it becomes one of the most powerful tools you'll ever own. We've been conditioned to fill the space, to respond instantly, to prove that we know. But those who master the art of listening, of reading the room, of reading people, gain insights no amount of talking can offer. You can't study someone if you're too busy trying to impress them. You can't assess the truth if you're too consumed by your own narrative. Silence gives you the upper hand, not by hiding your voice, but by sharpening your awareness. When you speak less, you notice more. Tension behind the smiles, insecurity beneath the confidence, manipulation behind the charm. The quiet mind sees what the distracted one never notices. A close friend of mine, Daniel, spent years working in corporate finance. He wasn't the kind of guy to interrupt a meeting or throw around buzzwords. He rarely gave his opinion unless asked directly. But what people didn't realize was that while everyone else was posturing, Daniel was paying attention. He noticed who always changed their stance in front of upper management. He watched who took credit for others' ideas, who played politics, and who actually listened. For 2 years, he said little, but saw everything. So when a new director position opened up, Daniel wasn't the most vocal candidate, but he was the only one who understood the full map of people, motives, and dynamics. They gave him the job, not because he talked well, but because he saw clearly. This is what happens when you observe more than you speak. You collect information that others miss. You see what isn't said. You pick up on patterns. You detect power shifts before they become problems. Observation is presence without pressure. It's how you enter a room and read what's really happening instead of reacting to what's being performed. It's how you protect your energy. And in a world full of manipulation, noise, and surface-level charm, that clarity is power. The Stoics knew this long before the digital age. Seneca wrote about the strength of withdrawing into stillness. Epictetus taught that most people's troubles come from responding too quickly, from thinking they must speak. But the Stoic path teaches you to wait, to listen, to learn. You don't jump into every argument. You don't correct every false statement. You don't trade your inner calm just to win a momentary reaction. Instead, you observe quietly, respond wisely, and move forward with confidence rooted in understanding, not emotion. This kind of restraint isn't passive, it's a strategy. When you speak only when necessary, your words gain weight. People listen when you talk. Not because you've said a lot before, but because they've learned your silence is deliberate. And in many rooms, that's the difference between being heard and being ignored. A man who controls his tongue controls the room, not by overpowering others, but by making his presence impossible to dismiss. In practice, this means slowing down your instinct to reply. Next time someone challenges your idea, don't rush to defend. Pause. Ask a question instead. Let them speak more. The more they talk, the more they reveal. Next time someone pushes your buttons, don't snap back. Let silence create discomfort. Let them sit in their own emotion. That space you give yourself, that pause, is where composure is forged. It's where you learn to lead with stillness, not reactivity. And it doesn't stop at conversations. When you spend more time watching your environment, your relationships shift. You begin to see who's aligned with you and who's playing roles. You begin to notice the energy in the room, the emotional undercurrents, the power dynamics. And without saying a word, you adapt. Not by changing who you are, but by knowing where to stand and when to move. You no longer need to guess. You've already seen what you needed to see. Speak less, observe more. Not because you have nothing to say, but because what you say should come from depth, not from impulse. Discipline isn't just about what you avoid doing. It's also about what you choose to notice. And the one who notices the most holds the advantage. Whether in business, relationships, leadership, or life, the person who watches carefully acts wisely. Don't underestimate the strength of silence. It is not absence. It is preparation. It is a statement of control. It is the mark of someone who no longer needs to shout, because they've already seen enough to speak with certainty. And when you speak from that place, not to be heard, but because what you say matters, people will listen, not just to your words, but to the weight behind them. In the end, observation is not passive. It is a form of self-mastery. It sharpens your intuition. It protects your peace. And it builds the kind of respect that doesn't have to be demanded, because it's earned quietly, consistently, and without compromise. Speak less, see more, and let the silence between your words tell the world exactly who you are. 3. Calm is a superpower in a loud world. When everything around you demands a reaction, your refusal to be shaken becomes your greatest strength. In a world built on noise, speed, and emotional volatility, calm isn't passive, it's revolutionary. While others raise their voices to assert control, you lower your heart rate and reclaim power. While crowds chase validation through chaos, you create space within yourself. That space is rare. That space is a strength. And that space is where clarity lives. Remaining calm when tension rises is not weakness. It's proof of inner mastery. Anyone can react. That requires nothing but impulse. But to remain still in the face of provocation, to respond rather than explode, to think clearly when others lose their grip, that's something else entirely. It's self-discipline. It's emotional resilience. And it is the mark of someone who has trained their mind to be unshaken by what they cannot control. Calmness isn't the absence of feeling, it's the presence of control. Your thoughts still move, emotions still come, but you don't hand them the wheel. You observe, you breathe, you hold the center. This is what separates those who are easily manipulated from those who become unmovable. The calm man cannot be baited, cannot be rattled, cannot be played. And for that reason, he becomes a presence people take seriously, even if he says nothing at all. What makes calmness so powerful is that it changes the emotional temperature of the room. When one person stays grounded, others notice, not because he demands attention, but because he doesn't need it. And that lack of need, that inner quiet, creates weight. It stabilizes those around him. People naturally trust the person who doesn't overreact, who doesn't compete to speak, who listens more than he asserts. His calmness becomes an anchor. And in times of pressure, people follow anchors, not noise. But staying calm is not an accident. It is not luck or personality. It is discipline, refined through practice. You don't wake up composed. You train your mind to pause before it speaks, to slow down before it spirals, to choose response over reaction. The Stoics called this the space between stimulus and response, the breath where reason enters. The more you live in that space, the stronger you become. This applies to every aspect of your life. In relationships, when conflict arises, calmness de-escalates. In leadership, when teams fall into crisis, calmness restores order. In daily life, when unexpected events hit, calmness protects your energy. You stop fighting what's outside and start mastering what's within. This doesn't mean you let things slide or become indifferent. It means your reaction is a choice, not a default. The reality is, most people today are overstimulated and undercentered. They react not because they must, but because they're conditioned to. Every alert, every comment, every inconvenience becomes a trigger. But when you discipline your mind to remain calm, you remove yourself from that loop. You choose stillness over speed, clarity over chaos, and peace over pride. In doing so, you become someone others can rely on, not because you have all the answers, but because you know how to stay steady when others don't. And this steadiness isn't loud. It doesn't advertise itself. It doesn't need applause. It builds in silence over time until one day you realize you don't panic in moments that used to break you. You don't argue just to be right. You don't react just to defend your ego. You've created a calm center. And that center is now your power source. The Stoics didn't teach calmness as a soft virtue. They taught it as a warrior's strength. Because the man who stays calm is harder to manipulate. He's harder to provoke. He doesn't chase status. He doesn't fold under pressure. His strength doesn't need to be displayed, it's understood. This doesn't make him passive, it makes him precise. And precision always outlasts intensity. When you walk into a loud world and bring stillness with you, people feel it. They may not know what it is, but they feel it. And over time, they respect it. Not because you demanded it, but because your presence shifted something. Because in a world full of noise, the quiet man stands out. Not as invisible, but as undeniable. So let others rush, let others react, let others prove. You choose calm. Not because it's easy, but because it's powerful. You choose calm because that's where your mind is sharpest. Your words are strongest, and your presence is most impactful. And when life tests you, and it will, you'll find that your ability to stay calm is what carries you through, even when everything else is trying to pull you under. In the end, calmness is not a personality trait. It's a trained decision. It's a habit built through stillness, reflection, and emotional control. And when you master that choice, you walk through life differently. Not because the world changes, but because you do. You stop reacting, you start responding, and people respond to you not because you shout, but because you've become the one who doesn't need to. That's the power of calm. And in a loud world, it's your greatest advantage. 4. Let your actions speak louder than your ego. The louder your ego becomes, the weaker your impact grows. In a world filled with posturing and performance, nothing commands more respect than quiet, consistent action. You don't need to declare your greatness to the world. You need to prove it to yourself, silently, daily, through what you do, not what you say. That's the Stoic way. And in a culture obsessed with being seen, true power comes from being felt without needing to be noticed. Ego craves validation. Action doesn't care. Ego talks, action builds. One chases approval, the other creates results. And when you let your ego speak for you, you become a prisoner of how others perceive you. But when your actions speak instead, you become free, because results can't be denied, consistency can't be faked, and real respect can't be demanded. It must be earned, moment by moment, through quiet excellence. A friend of mine, Jordan, runs a small auto shop on the outskirts of town. You wouldn't know his name unless you asked around. He doesn't run ads, he doesn't post quotes online, he doesn't care about clout, but people wait weeks just to get their cars seen by him. Why? Because he's reliable, because he treats every job like it's the most important, because when someone's in a bind and can't afford full price, he helps anyway, no questions asked. Jordan never talks about integrity, he lives it, and that's why his reputation is untouchable. Not built by words, built by actions. This is what Stoicism demands of us. Drop the need to impress and embrace the discipline to improve. It's not about announcing what you're going to do. It's about becoming someone who delivers, whether anyone is watching or not. That kind of consistency is rare. And that kind of rare is what makes people take notice, even when you never ask them to. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. The moment you stop trying to look like a man of strength and start living like one, everything shifts. And it's not because people will suddenly praise you. It's because your energy changes. You begin to act with clarity, not noise. You move with purpose, not ego. You become more grounded, less reactive. And that kind of inner certainty, rooted in action, not identity, is what draws real trust. Ego is loud when there's nothing solid underneath. It wants applause before the work is done. It wants to be seen before it's earned. But silence? Silence belongs to those who are too busy doing the work. The man who trains in solitude, who shows up when no one's watching, who holds himself accountable before anyone else can, that's the man people eventually follow, not because he asks, but because he leads himself. Stoicism teaches you to do the hard things quietly. You don't need credit, you don't need approval. What you need is the truth of who you are when no one is watching. That's where your discipline is tested, that's where your character is forged, and that's where your respect begins, within, not outside. The next time you feel tempted to explain yourself, to defend your name, to prove your value, stop. Breathe. Ask yourself if your actions already speak for you. If not, speak less and do more. Let the silence of your grind echo louder than any caption could. Let the way you carry yourself in quiet moments say what your ego never could. You don't need a stage to be powerful. You need standards. You don't need praise to stay committed. You need discipline. And the more you show up for yourself, the less you'll need the world to acknowledge you. That's when you know you've grown. That's when you've shifted from noise to presence. In every room, there are two types of men. Those who talk about what they're going to do, and those who simply do it. One draws attention for a moment, the other earns respect for a lifetime. Be the second. Let others waste their energy on performance. You stay focused on execution. Because when results speak, even your silence is respected. The modern world rewards appearance. But real power isn't cosmetic, it's consistent. You want to build something that lasts? Build in silence. You want to become someone unshakable? Stop explaining, start executing. Let your reputation be built from the ground up by choices no one sees, by standards only you enforce, and by work that speaks long after you've walked out of the room. In the end, the world doesn't remember who shouted the loudest. It remembers who showed up, again and again, regardless of the spotlight. So when you feel your ego rise, remind yourself, real men don't perform, they prepare. They build, and they earn their place through grit, not words. Your actions are your resume, your discipline is your message, and your quiet, consistent presence is what sets you apart from everyone who needs the world to notice them. Speak through your results, move with humility, and let your ego starve while your impact grows. That's the Stoic path, and in a world full of noise, it's the only one that lasts. 5. The strongest minds don't rush to respond. Real strength doesn't show itself in shouting matches or emotional outbursts. It shows in stillness, especially when provoked. When tension rises and everyone expects a reaction, the person who stays silent holds the greatest power in the room. It's not passivity, it's control. And in the Stoic way of living, that control is a reflection of something deeper, a disciplined mind that refuses to be governed by impulse. Most people don't realize how quickly they give away their power. One comment, one insult, one disagreement, and their composure disappears. They speak too soon, defend too fast, and regret too late. But the one who pauses, the one who steps back to observe, is the one who sees the whole board before making a move. That pause is not weakness. That pause is a strategy. It's self-mastery disguised as silence. It's the invisible armor that shields you from being controlled by every external force trying to trigger you. You've seen it. A heated conversation spirals, and one person's voice keeps rising, faster, louder, more desperate. They try to dominate through volume. But the truth is simple. The louder the voice, the weaker the ground it stands on. Because real confidence doesn't need to react. It already knows where it stands. It already understands the value of timing. It knows that not everything deserves a response, and that silence often says more than words ever could. There was a man I worked with years ago, a senior advisor on a high-stakes corporate deal. Every meeting had tension. Investors demanded answers. Executives threw blame. People cracked under pressure. But this man, David, never rushed. He listened. Even when targeted directly, even when others raised their voices, he stayed centered. When he finally spoke, it was short, clear, and impossible to ignore. That calm presence didn't make him passive, it made him respected. He didn't need to fight to be heard, because his restraint earned attention long before his words arrived. That's the kind of inner discipline Stoicism teaches. Don't let urgency decide your tone. Don't let chaos dictate your clarity. And don't mistake fast reactions for effective responses. When your mind is trained to wait, to breathe, to see, the way you respond becomes more powerful than anything you could have said in the heat of the moment. You become a presence of gravity, not because you dominate, but because you don't flinch. In daily life, this shows up more often than you think. Someone cuts you off in traffic. A coworker undermines your idea. A family member says something insensitive. The impulse is always the same: strike back, make them feel what you feel. But that instinct comes from ego, not strength. It comes from insecurity, trying to defend itself, not from a grounded mind choosing peace. And when you choose to respond instead of react, you not only protect your dignity, you influence the dynamic. What would happen if the next time you were provoked, you didn't react at all? What if you just paused, observed the situation, and asked yourself, what outcome do I really want? That moment of reflection might save you hours of regret. It might save a relationship. It might earn you respect from people who expected you to fold. Because when you don't meet aggression with aggression, but with grounded awareness, you change the game. You don't play defense, you play mastery. Stoic resilience isn't about being numb, it's about being conscious. You still feel everything. You're just not enslaved by what you feel. You hold space between emotion and expression. You create distance between the external event and your internal state. And in that distance, you become powerful. Not by controlling others, but by never letting others control you. In that silence, you give yourself time to choose wisely. Ask yourself if this moment is truly worth your energy, to determine whether your response will help or harm. This is where emotional intelligence meets mental toughness. It's not about walking away from every conflict. It's about entering each one with clarity, not chaos. With intention, not instinct. This kind of response doesn't come naturally. It's trained. It's the result of daily self-discipline, of morning routines built around stillness, of habits that strengthen your ability to sit with discomfort without immediately reacting to it. And the more you practice it, the more unshakable you become. People will try to provoke you. They'll try to draw you into their storm. But you don't have to join them. You can stay rooted. You can let them whirl around you while you remain unmoved. That's why the strongest minds don't rush to respond, because they've already done the work. They've already faced themselves. They've already trained for the moment long before the moment arrived. So they don't need to act tough. They just are. And that presence, the one that doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't react, is magnetic. It's the kind of presence that doesn't need explanation. It's respected simply because it's rare. The next time someone tries to get a rise out of you, remember this: you don't owe anyone your reaction. You don't need to defend your ego. You don't need to respond on their timeline. Your power is in your pause. Your strength is in your stillness. And your leadership is in your ability to remain calm, composed, and unshaken when everything around you screams for chaos. Let them shout. Let them perform. Let them reveal themselves. You stay quiet. You stay focused. You move with purpose, not pressure. And when the moment comes to speak, speak like a man who waited for the right moment. Not like someone who couldn't hold it in. Because in the end, it's not about being the first to speak. It's about being the one they remember when everything else fades. 6. Your silence makes others pay attention. There's a moment, rare but unmistakable, when a quiet presence enters a loud room and everything changes. Not because anything dramatic was said, but because nothing was said. And yet, everyone notices. In a world that rewards noise, true power often comes from restraint. When you stay silent by choice, you break patterns. You interrupt expectations. You remind people that presence does not always need volume to be felt. We've been conditioned to think that to matter, we must speak. To be respected, we must be loud. That attention must be earned through display. But what if that belief is backward? What if the most powerful people in the room are not those who dominate conversation, but those who control their energy so deeply, they speak only when it counts. And because they rarely speak, everyone listens when they do. Stoic philosophy doesn't glorify silence as a gimmick. It treats it as a form of mental discipline. The kind of silence that commands attention is not the silence of insecurity, it is the silence of mastery, of presence, of a mind that no longer needs to defend itself with constant reaction. A man who has trained his thoughts, who observes before speaking, who restrains his impulses, not because he's afraid, but because he's precise, that man becomes hard to ignore. Even in his stillness, he shifts the atmosphere. The world is already loud. People compete for airtime, shout to be seen, and talk over one another just to validate their existence. In the middle of that, your silence becomes magnetic. It disrupts the rhythm of chaos. It invites curiosity. People begin to wonder what you see that they don't, what you're holding back that they've missed. And that wondering, without a single word, pulls attention toward you without effort or force. But this only works when your silence is intentional, when it is rooted in observation, in clarity, in internal strength. The man who stays silent because he has nothing to say fades, but the man who stays silent because he's listening, calculating, waiting for the right moment, he rises. Because silence with purpose is louder than noise without reason. And when others realize that your words are rare, they start to value each one more. You don't have to declare your authority. You don't have to explain your intentions. You don't have to compete for validation. When your silence is steady and your presence calm, people instinctively adjust around you. They speak with more care. They listen more closely. They choose their words more thoughtfully because they're aware that you are not playing the same game as everyone else. This is how quiet confidence works. It doesn't scream. It doesn't posture. It just exists fully. And because it doesn't beg for acknowledgement, it earns it. That's the paradox of real presence. It grows stronger the less you try to force it. The more you trust your stillness, the more others begin to trust it too. But don't confuse silence with withdrawal. This is not about hiding. It's about choosing. It's about rejecting the pressure to respond to every stimulus and instead responding only when it matters. You control the flow. You control the energy, and in doing so, you rise above the noise without needing to rise above anyone. There's power in letting others fill the space while you hold your center. Not reacting allows you to see what others miss. It gives you leverage. It gives you time to think clearly. And it reminds others that you are not reactive. You are intentional. That difference changes how people treat you. It changes how they hear you. Because they know your silence is not absence. It's awareness. And when that awareness speaks, it carries weight. Stoicism teaches that silence, when practiced with wisdom, is a form of strength few can touch. It's not always comfortable. It may even feel unnatural in the beginning, especially when your instinct is to respond, to defend, to contribute. But silence isn't about shrinking. It's about rising inward before stepping outward. It's about showing the world that your value is not in how often you speak, but in how clearly you see. Let others speak first. Let them reveal themselves. Let them search for approval. You sit in stillness. You gather what matters. And when the time is right, you'll know. Because you'll speak, not to be heard, but to be understood. And that single moment born from deep silence will echo louder than all the noise that came before it. In the end, your silence is not just a tool, it's a mirror. It reflects your control, your peace, and your power. And those who pay attention will see that clearly, even if you say nothing at all. So don't rush to fill the void. Be the void. The presence that doesn't compete, doesn't chase, doesn't tremble. And watch how the world begins to lean in. Not because you asked it to, but because your stillness spoke the loudest. 7. Respect is not demanded. It's attracted through self-mastery. Respect doesn't respond to demands. It doesn't show up because you raise your voice, wear the right title, or remind people of your worth. Real respect gravitates toward those who don't need to ask for it, because who they are speaks louder than anything they could say. And at the root of that presence is one thing: self-mastery. When you know how to lead yourself, when your emotions are disciplined, your mind is clear, and your values are lived instead of spoken, you no longer need to convince the world to take you seriously. It happens on its own. In a world that constantly rewards appearances, self-mastery builds substance. It's not for show. It's not part of your brand. It's what you do when no one's clapping. It's the choices you make when you're alone, when there's no audience, when the only voice you hear is your own. And it's in those moments, quiet, repetitive, unnoticed, that your character is shaped. The more you choose discipline over impulse, presence over ego, clarity over chaos, the more grounded you become. And that groundedness becomes magnetic. You attract respect by being someone who doesn't need it. You walk into the room and don't try to dominate it, yet people feel your presence. You don't explain your boundaries, they're understood. You don't react to insults, they don't reach you. That level of calm, of restraint, of emotional clarity is rare. And anything rare naturally draws attention. Not because it demands it, but because it reflects a power most people haven't yet earned. This is why the Stoic path isn't about power over others, it's about power over self. And paradoxically, once you master yourself, others begin to trust you more, follow you more, respect you more. Not because you told them to, but because you've become someone worth following. You don't win respect by trying to impress. You win it by being real, consistent, and unmoved by the noise. Think of the people in your life whom you truly respect. It's probably not the ones who talk the most, seek attention, or chase approval. It's the ones who show up with quiet strength, who make decisions without drama, who remain composed when others fall apart. These people have depth, and depth can't be faked. It comes from doing the inner work day after day when no one's watching. So how do you develop that level of self-mastery? You start small. You start by watching your thoughts instead of reacting to them. You stop chasing arguments and start choosing peace. You build routines that anchor you, daily stillness, daily reflection, daily restraint. And most of all, you learn how to sit with discomfort without letting it control you. Because the man who can sit in silence, who can endure discomfort, who can choose wisdom over ego, that man commands a different kind of attention. Self-respect always comes first. When you respect yourself, your time, your energy, your standards, you send a clear signal to the world about how you allow yourself to be treated. And when you stop explaining, stop performing, stop negotiating your worth, people either rise to meet your standard or fall away. Either way, you win. Because your power isn't tied to their response, it's anchored in your identity. Respect that's built on validation is fragile. It crumbles the moment people stop clapping. But respect built on self-mastery is untouchable. It stays with you even when you're misunderstood. It protects you in times of conflict. It elevates you in rooms where others fight for approval. And it reminds you that the most powerful respect is not the kind people give you, but the kind they feel when they're around you. Stoicism doesn't tell you to hide your strength. It teaches you how to refine it, how to make it so stable, so silent, so real, that you don't have to announce it anymore. You don't lower your voice to sound more serious. You don't raise your tone to seem important. You just live with clarity, act with integrity, and move with quiet purpose. That presence speaks, and what it says is, I don't need your recognition. I already know who I am. When you live this way, everything changes. Conversations shift, relationships deepen, opportunities find you, not because you chase them, but because who you are invites them. And the people who matter will see it. Not immediately, not always loudly, but they will see it. Because truth always shines through, especially when it's lived without explanation. So don't waste time demanding respect. Don't beg the world to see your value. Don't perform your strength. Build it. Build it in silence. Build it through self-discipline. Through the daily act of showing up for yourself when it's inconvenient, when no one notices, when no one cares but you. That is where real power lives. And when you live that way long enough, you won't need to chase respect. You'll realize it's already following you. Quietly, steadily, unshakably. 8. Stillness builds the aura of authority. There's a presence that enters the room before you speak. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to force it. It's the energy of someone who is centered, unmoved, and aware. That presence is built in stillness, not in silence alone, but in inner clarity, a kind of calm that doesn't need to explain itself. The world feels it before it understands it. That's the authority that doesn't shout. That's the quiet power Stoicism teaches us to develop. Most people chase authority through titles, volume, or dominance. But true authority doesn't come from what you control. It comes from what you no longer need to control. And nothing reflects that more clearly than the man who knows how to be still. Still, not because he's passive, but because he's focused. Still, not because he's timid, but because he's deliberate. His stillness is a signal that he's not thrown by chaos. He's not pulled by noise, he's rooted in something deeper. Stillness in Stoicism is not stagnation, it's awareness without reactivity. It's knowing what matters and what doesn't. It's choosing not to chase what others blindly pursue. And when you embody that, you carry an unshakable presence. People notice, not because you're trying to be seen, but because you're too grounded to ignore. In a world that moves too fast, the man who slows down becomes magnetic. In a world obsessed with reaction, the man who remains composed becomes a pillar. Stillness sharpens perception. It trains the mind to see beyond the obvious. When you're still, you feel the energy shift in a room. You catch the words that weren't said. You notice who's aligned and who's pretending. While others rush to speak, defend, or assert, you sit in that space between impulse and action. Listening, observing, choosing. And in that pause, you gain clarity that those reacting can't access. That's the space where wisdom lives. That's where real leadership begins. A man with stillness doesn't need to declare his confidence. It radiates. He doesn't panic when plans fall apart. He adjusts. He doesn't seek control. He becomes it. He leads not with force, but with certainty. And when things go wrong, people look to him. Not because he promises answers, but because his calm reminds them that stability is possible. His presence tells them everything will hold, even when nothing else does. But stillness must be cultivated. It's not inherited. It's trained through discipline, through choosing discomfort without flinching, through facing stress without escalation, through standing still when everything tempts you to move. You practice it in traffic, in arguments, in disappointment, in delay. You learn to breathe when frustration rises. You learn to wait when you want to interrupt. You learn to observe your reaction before you express it. That's how inner authority is built. Not in the spotlight, but in the moments no one sees. Stoicism doesn't ask you to deny emotion. It asks you to direct it. Not every emotion deserves a stage. Not every impulse needs a microphone. When you own your reactions, you own your power. And when you no longer need to fight for control, you become the one others naturally follow. That's the paradox. The less you try to dominate, the more others respect your presence. Because respect isn't inspired by noise, it's inspired by restraint. People confuse loudness with strength. But strength doesn't panic. Strength doesn't flinch. Strength stands firm without raising its voice. Stillness is what gives that strength shape. It's what makes your words cut deeper when you finally choose to speak. It's what makes your decisions hold more weight, because they weren't made from urgency, but from clarity. And clarity is what makes your presence trustworthy. In everyday life, stillness is what allows you to walk into any room and feel like you belong there. Because your peace doesn't depend on anyone's approval. It's what lets you handle chaos without becoming chaotic. It's what protects your energy, your focus, and your discipline in a world constantly pulling you away from yourself. And that consistency of remaining yourself when everything is trying to shape you is what makes you powerful. Authority built through fear fades. Authority built through volume burns out. But authority built through stillness endures, because it doesn't need reinforcement. It is its own foundation. And the men who embody it don't have to talk about being strong. They just are. They don't have to be perfect. They just have to be present. Present with themselves, present with their choices, present with their values. So build your stillness, not for show, but for survival. Build it to become the man who doesn't react to every trigger, who doesn't move for every distraction, who doesn't break under pressure. Build it so your presence speaks for you, even when your mouth stays closed. Because in the end, your calm becomes your edge. And when others look for direction, they'll find it. Not in the one shouting orders, but in the one standing steady, watching closely, and moving with quiet certainty. That's the aura of authority, and it begins where stillness lives. In a world that demands noise, speed, and reaction, The man who learns to pause, reflect, and act with calm precision becomes impossible to ignore. The teachings of Stoicism are not ancient ideals locked in time. They are tools for today, for this exact moment, and for the kind of life that is grounded in purpose and quiet confidence. Every principle we explored, disciplining your mind, observing more than speaking, staying calm in the storm, acting without ego, responding with wisdom, letting your silence speak, earning respect through self-mastery, and embodying stillness. These are not theories. They are habits. They are choices. And they are practices that sharpen your focus, elevate your presence, and deepen your strength from the inside out. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to chase recognition to be respected. You don't need to control the outside world when you've mastered the one within. That is where true leadership begins. That is where real respect follows, naturally, without effort, without demand. Let today be the start of something different. Choose to train your mind daily. Choose self-discipline over comfort. Practice emotional control even when no one sees. Pay attention to your silence, your focus, your stillness. Each one builds something greater than an image. It builds identity. You become unshaken, undistracted, and deeply respected, not because of what you say, but because of who you've become. If this message resonates, take a moment to reflect, and if you feel called, share your own story in the comments. Tell us when you chose calm over reaction, when you held back and grew stronger. Your experience may be the voice someone else needs to keep going. And together, we create a space where stillness is not weakness, but proof of an unbreakable mind.